Greetings, I'm Captain Ranger, and welcome back to the Sunday Sampler. This week we're going to be taking a quick look at Destiny Fail Us, A New Life. This is a visual novel from Strawberry Dagger Studios, and as per usual, this is a review copy, this time via my itch.io press account. So, what is Destiny Fail Us, outside of sounding like a joke about Bungie these days? In reality, this is a visual novel based on a web manga by Amelia Hanks and Tyler Cole that ran for a few years. It's been on hiatus for quite a while, but it seems that they focused on a Kickstarter to get the visual novel done, which recently had an Android version, which is where it came onto my radar. So let's just dive right into the story of things. You play Idriel, a kind of geeky, sort of loser teenage girl who has a group of friends, but has really been kind of coasting through things, and, well, things happen. This is more of a slice of life than anything else, to be perfectly honest. There is some romance, there is a romantic story, depending on the ending you get, of course, and your choices, because visual novel. But it meanders along the way. The main plot isn't very cohesive because it wants you to be able to really pick and choose and be able to do what you want, which isn't a bad thing when done well. On this one, though, it just feels like there's a lot of spacing. Granted, that does give some way for some very funny moments and more than a few subplots along the way to resolve with your friends and meet new friends and potential more. So it's not a complete black mark. It's just something, if you're looking for a more laser guided storyline, this really isn't it. If you're looking for something more of getting into this girl's life, because it does drop you right into the middle of things, and unless you go into her cell phone and read some of the character bios, which I'm not sure why she would have character biographies on her phone, but work with me here, then you're really not going to figure out what's going on for a fair amount of time, because you don't know these characters and they don't really give a introduction to anyone except for new people in Idriel's life. There's a good reason why the transfer student is a very overused trope. It's an easy way to do introductions for a large amount of characters, and this game doesn't do that. So you're left kind of guessing and getting some story along the way. Little off-putting, but nothing terrible. What I really didn't like about the story, even though I have harped on it for the last, minute or so, is that it spends a lot of time kind of wasted and doesn't pay off for some things. It spends time, for example, going to classes and setting those up, when really they could have been skipped just in general, or focused on in other storylines. In the storyline that I did for my first impressions, there was a lot of times where it would go through the scene transition, Idriel would sit down, the teacher would stand at the front of the class, do 2 or 3 sentences, fade out, go to the next class, or go to lunch. It's not a very efficient use of time. And when this is a shorter novel, that wasted time is a lot more important. And on top of that, there was a lot of conflict that just quickly died out after one choice, or just had characters that would completely drop off the map when there was a lot of time just a few minutes ago focused on them, which may be leading into the sequel hook that they tease a lot during this game. And it honestly feels like this game was built around a larger scope, but was either pared down or broke into a potential trilogy. As a matter of fact, the tutorial talks a lot about Game 2, where some of the systems in this game are a lot more important than they are in this game, which is a little strange. So let's talk really quick about the characters. I don't want to focus on really anyone in particular, except for one or two. the main cast runs really the gambit from shy and sweet to just loud jerk-ass for the teenagers. Yeah, pretty much your standard teenage group. There are some more extreme or out there personalities, but once again, teenagers. So that makes a lot more sense. But that also extends to the teaching staff. You have a very, very, very bitter woman that absolutely hates her students. Which, yes, those teachers exist. But whenever you only have probably 5 or 6 teachers introduced on the staff, it feels like wasted time, particularly when, at least in the storyline I had, there was no real payoff to why she was there in the first place. Like I said, wasted time. And the sequel hook just is another example of that, where they set up this mystery that looks like it's going to pan out at some point during the story, and maybe it does on another storyline, or putting all the 7 storylines together gives this overarching view of this mystery. But I honestly would be surprised by that, to be perfectly honest. So maybe something for the second story, which I do know that there's a side story to this game, but I believe it's a prequel, so that sequel hook doesn't matter, most likely. And, well, the out there characters, like Mr. Sly is probably the best example of that, where, honestly, I thought he was a student for quite a while. But that may just be down to graphics, which we'll get to in a moment. So let's just go to the technical side of things. Word count, according to the store page, was 135,000 words, which sounds like a lot, but for a visual novel, that's actually on the shorter side of things. It took me roughly 4 hours and some change to be able to get through the first reading, which, because of 7 endings and, according to the store page, 200 choice menus, that's still a fair amount that I haven't seen yet. That said, whenever you hit that many choice menus, you're starting to get into filler territory, and that's where this game goes, where there's a lot of repeated actions. There's a lot of choices that are, there for flavor, but nothing else. So how many of those 200 choices really matter? I really can't say, because this works on a stat system where you'll... matter of fact, let's just go to the stat screen. We'll just pause here and go to stats. You'll see, well, this is early game stats, the friends and then potential lovers, with family as well, and also Idriel's stats. And this just more gives you an idea of where you stand. And that's about it for relationships. Your academic stats, outside of applying yourself to your work, doesn't really matter from what I could tell. There may be something more subtle behind the scenes, or it may be on another storyline. I don't know, but yeah, it feels like it wants to commit to a more RPG stat-driven style of game, but because it doesn't commit to it, it feels half-assed, because it kind of is, because they even go as far to say in the tutorial itself that the stats don't matter that much in this game. Now, how they plan on doing more with that in the second game, if there is a second game, of course, because the Windows version of this is a year old now, and I saw the Android version come out about a week or 2 ago, so there is still time to see where they go with this if they continue on. So let's cut off this menu and go to another menu, because menus, the cell phone is an interesting thing. And no, I don't use interesting as my usual backhanded kind of compliment way. I mean actually interesting. This is a way to introduce extra dialogue that really couldn't be done another way very easily, because well, teenage girl. Teenage girls love their cell phones and text back and forth constantly. And like I said, the character profiles are a little strange, but we'll just go game mechanics. And occasionally you will have a text message come up where you have to make a choice, and some of those matter, some of those don't. But it's, once again, for you to figure out. So back to the primary, and we'll do graphics. It has a very, very flat style that is actually ripped right from the manga. So it makes a lot of sense that it's this flat. That said, I would have loved to have seen a lot more shading, particularly in the face, because all the faces look pretty samey, to be perfectly honest, outside of just eye color and, well, hair. Which I realize hair isn't part of the face, it goes on top of the face, but close enough. It does take some getting used to, but it did grow on me after a while. That said, some of the characters kind of blended into the background, particularly James, or really anyone that has very light hair, but he has blonde hair, so it was even worse. And a lot of the backgrounds are very bright, so you can see white character, blonde hair, blends right in. And the teachers aren't really set apart graphically from the students either, which is a problem because, well, maybe it's a problem because of the uniforms that the students wear, because the uniforms aren't uniform. And no, I'm not talking about flair like cat ears or, star glasses or anything. I'm talking about individual students are given different uniforms based on the department that their club is in, because reasons. It makes really little sense, and because of that, the students aren't differentiated enough from the teachers when the teachers are in a very similar style and are in a very similar scale. The teachers don't look older, they look like they're fresh out of high school, which is, like I said, a little tough to really differentiate. Particularly Mr. Sly was the worst example of this, because I, for a while, thought he was just another student because all the students were wearing different jackets and he was wearing a jacket. I realize it's a silly thing, but it just bugged me. And that's really it for graphics. I should say backgrounds are very nice, and the CG's cutscenes are very nice as well. I do really like those, even though the backgrounds did kind of blend in with characters, or characters blended in with backgrounds. It's a minor quip because it mostly relied on characters with lighter hair, and because the characters typically had the anime color hairs, well, I mean, the main character has pink hair, and that's natural, by the way. Well, I assume. I actually can check that. But her mom has it, so I'm assuming hereditary. Because of all the bright colored hairs, blending in the backgrounds doesn't really matter all that much. So, voice and music. Voice, very limited, just a few exclamations, your ohs, ums, that sort of thing. And that's really about it, and it's pretty much limited to the main characters from what I could recall. I don't recall really any other character making any noise vocally whatsoever. So, you've probably already heard it by this point, so pretty much all I need to say about that. Music is rather nice, though. It faded in the background rather nicely and really set the mood in a very good way. This is going to sound very backhanded, but it didn't grate on me. And a lot of these very cheap, or on the cheaper side of thing, visual novels tend to have kind of just stock, very grating music that doesn't really fit in the novel itself. So it's very nice to see the music kind of just blend in and be part of the scene, and not a part of the scene, or apart from the scene. I probably should have worded that a little bit better, but what the hell. So, my final thoughts. I do wish that the story was a little bit tighter and just meandered more than what I really liked. And some of the actions are just too repetitive. Homework is a big example of this, and classes are a big example where There's no payoff. It's just, okay, this scene again. It's padding. Very cheap padding that really shouldn't be there. And characters, while extreme at times, feel fairly realistic overall, if sometimes a little stereotypical. But overall, not bad for a first attempt on a visual novel. At least I wasn't able to find anything else from them before this visual novel. They have done a side story about 2 of the characters that appear around the 1/3 of the way through, at least on my storyline. A side story of them meeting and falling in love. So there is that if you wish to get a taste. And I believe that's a free visual novel, but this one is $10 normally. And I'd say it's worth checking out if you want a cheaper visual novel that doesn't rely on titillation, because there are no anime boobies in this game, for better or worse. I'll leave that one up to you though. So that wraps us up for this week. As always, constructive feedback is greatly appreciated, either in the comments below, or if you don't really have anything to say but want me to know that you've enjoyed and or hated this, there's the appropriate buttons, and subscribe if you wish to see more of the Sunday Sampler or my other content. Thank you for watching, and we'll be sampling something next week. Until then, I'll see you.